The old saying about quality or quantity was never truer than in the world of motorcar building. It's true that the mass production methods pioneered by Henry Ford and followed by most other manufacturers helped to put the world on wheels. But there's equally no doubt that the market for the carefully assembled, hand-finished, precision-engineered car is as strong as ever, in spite of world wars, recessions, and economic ups and downs of every kind. Two things which are surprising about motorcars like the Rolls-Royce, built to the highest possible standards. One is that they have astonishing powers of survival. At a time when the life of the average car, from showroom to scrapyard, is anything from 7 to 10 years, even the earliest cars built by Rolls-Royce showed an amazing toughness and a determined refusal to give up the ghost after years and mileages which would long before have consigned other so-called quality cars to the crusher's embrace. So much so that of all the Rolls-Royce motor cars made, more than 60% still survive today, cherished and cared for by owners who value quality and reliability above all. The other is their rarity. Of course, it's obvious enough that making a car with this kind of care is going to take longer than stamping out a mass-produced assembly line model. But this car is something unusual even for a Rolls-Royce. A limited edition of a very special version of the current silver spur called the Centenary. It's being built, along with 25 identical stablemates, to celebrate the 100 years of the motor car, and also to commemorate a very significant landmark in the Rolls-Royce Motors story, a centenary of a rather different kind. At a time when popular models can reach totals of several million cars made before a replacement is introduced, the Rolls-Royce Motors celebration may seem modest indeed. For a company which has been making hand-built cars for most of the 20th century, a total of 100 million cars of all models over the years may not seem too ambitious. But the Centenary cars aren't being made to celebrate the 100th millionth Rolls-Royce, or the 10 millionth, or even the millionth. In all those years, just 100,000 cars have left the Rolls-Royce factories. And the fact that this kind of total would emerge from the giant plants of Japan or the United States in only a matter of weeks is a tribute to the care with which each car is assembled, from the very beginning of the company's story right up to the present day. It's not difficult to point to the car which actually started the story off in the first place. And it's probably fair to say it was one very like this Decauville, dating from 1901 and actually owned by John Welch from Dunmow in Essex. Sir Henry Royce bought one of these cars in 1903, and it must have given him valuable food for thought. As most cars of the time were fragile, temperamental and unreliable, he resolved to build one where the very best engineering techniques would be used to ensure smooth, refined and dependable transport, for those who could afford the best. All he needed was someone to market his cars, and a year later he found him. Following a meeting at the Midland Hotel in Manchester, he went into partnership with the Honourable Charles Stuart Rolls, sportsman, entrepreneur, car enthusiast and amateur racing driver, to form the world's most famous business partnership. During the following 2 years, production began with no less than 4 different Rolls-Royce models being offered to buyers. This was the smallest, with only 2 cylinders and an engine of 10 horsepower rating. This particular one is called Susie, after its registration number SU13, and is one of only 3 surviving examples of this earliest and smallest Rolls-Royce. But already it's possible to see the guidelines that future versions will follow. The classic radiator shape, and the emphasis on sound engineering and careful assembly. But it was Susie's successors which carried the story forward over the next 20 years. The larger 20 horsepower model laid the foundations of the Rolls-Royce reputation for speed and endurance by winning the 1906 Isle of Man TT, with Rolls at the wheel. And the largest model of all, the splendid 4050 horsepower, became one of the all-time classic designs, the Rolls-Royce Silver Ghost. This one belongs to Lord Montague of Beaulieu and dates from 1909, but it shows the style and the imposing proportions of the cars very well. Kept at the National Motor Museum in Beaulieu, it's in regular use for weddings as a tribute to its utter reliability. And that's a quality which was proved in this other Silver Ghost, 2 years younger. When the car was brand new and being used by the company as an experimental car, it was driven by E.W. Hives from London to Edinburgh, locked in top gear. A remarkable achievement on the rough roads of the time. The only halts were to take on fuel and to cope with the inevitable punctures. Every Rolls-Royce ever made is an heir to the company's long traditions. And 2 of those traditions can be seen on the front of today's cars. One is the famous Link RR logo etched in black on the front of the radiator. The other is the Flying Lady mascot, which dates back to 1911. Officially called the Spirit of Ecstasy, she was originally introduced to help maintain the dignity of the mark. There was at the time a fashion among many owners to fit all kinds of frivolous and flippant mascots of their own on top of the plain radiator cap. Far better, thought the company, to fit a more tasteful piece of sculpture to remove the temptation. And there she has been ever since. The mascot is still moulded to the original design, though there have been some changes over the years. The original castings became highly prized and were easily removed, so owners carried spare plain caps to use whenever the car had to be left unattended. Today's Flying Ladies are fixed, but with a spring mounting to avoid causing injuries in the event of an accident. It was the Silver Ghost which took Rolls-Royce to the pinnacle of world fame. Different versions of the car were turned out until well into the 1920s, and in the end, more than 6,000 were made. Because of the kind of market at which the car was aimed, its virtues of solidity and refinement were more important than superficial engineering or styling changes. And it was actually tough enough and reliable enough to be pressed into military service during the Great War. And this is what the elegant and luxurious Silver Ghost looked like when dressed for war, carrying 3 tons of armor plate and a massive gun turret. More than 400 were made, and their users ranged from Lawrence of Arabia to the Royal Air Force. In fact, the last of them were only retired in 1941, a quarter of a century after they were first built, after serving in another world war. But for all its virtues, the Silver Ghost was essentially an Edwardian design, though the final production version was able to hold its own in terms of reliability with cars which were much younger. This 1921 Silver Ghost recently covered almost 4,000 miles touring through Sweden and Finland, Russia, Poland and Germany in 9 days on the road, a feat which would deter many cars a fraction of its age. But some owners wanted cars which were smaller and less imposing, while others wanted the traditional style and opulence. So Rolls-Royce replaced the Silver Ghost at last by 2 designs. The smaller, lighter Rolls-Royce 20 horsepower, which was to provide the basis for all the company's smaller models right through to the outbreak of war. It had a new overhead valve engine with coil ignition and a 3-speed gearbox. But the most obvious difference was the radiator. Still the classic shape, but now fitted with a set of horizontal shutters. The 20 proved very popular with customers, and almost 3,000 were built by the end of the decade. As always, the coach builders of the day provided a choice of alternative body styles. This one is by a company called Page & Hunt, and it's a very rare Doctor's Coupe version. This style of compact coupe was popular between the wars to carry doctors on their daily rounds. For customers who still wanted style and opulence in the traditional manner, the Phantom One used the chassis of the Silver Ghost. But extra performance was provided by a larger 6-cylinder engine with narrowed bores and a longer stroke, and pushrod-operated overhead valves. But it was much more expensive. This version cost almost £4,000 when new, compared with £2,500 for a brand new Rolls-Royce 20 horsepower. And this one, built for diamond millionaire Otto Oppenheim, had some hidden extras, literally. A set of secret compartments were built into the car for carrying diamonds, safe from prying eyes and thieving hands. By the 1930s, several changes had taken place in the company, which were reflected in the cars they built. As coach-built bodies became bigger and heavier, engines had to be larger and more powerful to provide the power and performance which owners were looking for. The Phantom One gave way to the Phantom Two. This version dates from 1930, and it was given an entirely new chassis with improved springing and a lower center of gravity. But better handling was only half the battle, and later models like the Phantom 3, this one was made just before the outbreak of the Second World War, were fitted with a complex V12-cylinder engine in place of the original straight 6, which had descended from the engine used in the Silver Ghost. In the meantime, the 20 had been replaced by the 2025, with widened bores and a 3.5-litre version of the small 6-cylinder engine. A similar engine was also used for the first Bentley to be made by Rolls-Royce, after their takeover of the famous sports car maker in 1931. The splendid 3.5-litre, introduced in 1933 and which appealed to the more sporting-minded drivers. But performance was even more important in the smaller cars. And so 1936 saw the replacement of the 2025 by the 2530 model, with a 4.25-litre version of the 6-cylinder engine. An engine also fitted in the Bentley 4.25-litre, which replaced the 3.5-litre version in the same year. Each of the cars could be fitted with a variety of bodies from a wide range of coach builders. Generally speaking, the drop-head coupes like this 1936 2530 were faster than the progressively heavier and more luxurious saloons. These models took Rolls-Royce through to the eve of the Second World War. Although their replacements were on the stocks, the Rolls-Royce Wraith and the Mark V Bentley, less than 500 were made before the outbreak of fighting brought new priorities. High on the list was the production of the brilliant Rolls-Royce Merlin aero engine for the Hurricanes, Spitfires and Lancasters of the Royal Air Force in several new purpose-built factories. The first of these, in Crewe, was to become the base for car production after the war. And it was from this plant that designs like the Bentley Mark VI were to emerge once conditions were back to normal. The engine of the original Mark VI's was a 4.25-litre 6-cylinder unit similar to the pre-war cars. But in 1951, it was increased to 4.5 litres, again in the interests of higher performance. Once again, the engine was used in the parallel Rolls-Royce models, like this 1947 Silver Wraith Sedanka de Ville, which was used for European touring by its owners, where the ample space provided sleeping room inside the car in an emergency. In 1949, the Silver Wraith was joined by the Silver Dawn. This one dates from 1954 and is still in pristine condition after more than 117,000 miles on the road. 1955 saw both models being replaced by the first of the Silver Clouds and its Bentley equivalent, the S series. This one was built in 1956, and it's gone even further, with more than 300,000 miles under its wheels so far. In 1959, the Silver Cloud and the S series were succeeded by the Silver Cloud II and the Bentley S2, and in 1962 by the Silver Cloud III and the Bentley S3. The progression was, in design terms, as smooth as the performance of the cars themselves. But in 1965, there was a more dramatic replacement, with the introduction of the radically restyled and technically quite revolutionary Silver Shadow and T series, which were to continue in production until 1980. During that time, though, other exotic variations were added to the range, like the Corniche convertible and the Camargue coupe, both of which set new levels of comfort and refinement, even by Rolls-Royce standards. The story returns to the present day with the introduction of the Silver Spirit and Silver Spur in 1980. At the same time, the Bentley T2 was replaced by the Bentley Mulsanne. And this was the first step in a revitalization of the old Bentley sporting reputation, which was to result in, first, the Bentley Mulsanne Turbo, which delivered performance in plenty, and in 1985, the Bentley Turbo R Sports Saloon, which adds sporting suspension and revised aerodynamics to produce a high-performance package to delight the most enthusiastic drivers.
What was incredible motor car, but now, ladies and gentlemen, of course,
it all adds up to an astonishing variety of designs and ideas in what is still, by normal motor industry standards, a very small total production indeed. But if this seems a leisurely target to reach in 80 years of work, just stop to take a look at what the work involves. At just a few of the tasks, carefully executed and beautifully finished, which went into the making of the first of the Centenary cars. To begin with, there's little to separate the special cars from any other Rolls-Royce, or in the basic engineering processes from any other car in the world. The cutting, shaping, stamping and welding of the metal is fundamental to every model. But the Rolls-Royce methods rely much more heavily on careful craftsmanship and meticulous inspection to make sure that standards never slip. The classic radiator grille, for example, isn't stamped out on a press in a few seconds. It's shaped and soldered, smoothed and polished, so that each one is a handmade trophy of the craftsman's skill. And the Flying Lady mascot is cast just 10 at a time, using the traditional lost wax process, still unrivaled for quality and fineness of detail in the finished sculpture. Other stages in the production of any Rolls-Royce, or Bentley for that matter, set them apart from virtually all other cars made anywhere in the world. The hand cutting and stitching of the finest hides to make the seats and interior upholstery, for example. The careful matching and shaping of the burr walnut dashboards. The hand assembly and individual running in of every single engine for every single production car made. Even when the cars are finished, the care extends to searching for and identifying every single unexplained noise or vibration, either from the engine, or from the body, or the suspension, which can involve some unusual acrobatics. Yet even this kind of careful treatment falls slightly short of the prescription for the Centenary cars. Emphasizing a tradition going back to the first Silver Ghosts and the names of so many models right up to the current Silver Spur, the Rolls-Royce craftsmen fit inlaid silver monograms into the immaculate burr walnut door capping rails and into the walnut picnic tables, which fold away into the backs of the front seats. The back seat armrest holds a tray with a notepad and pen, and a console between the front seats holds a pair of specially engraved silver flasks and Waterford crystal glass tumblers. There are other special touches which stamp the cars as special collector's items. A plate inside the glove box which carries the original owner's name, a door plate which identifies it as a Centenary model, and a special three-color variation on the traditional coach builder's line along the shoulder line of the body and each individual wheel trim. And each owner will have a presentation case in the shape of the Rolls-Royce radiator containing a silver keyring, a silver ball pen, notepad, and a commemorative engraved silver plate. It all adds up to a supremely elegant carriage, with the royal blue paintwork contrasting with the champagne-coloured leather and the blue deep pile carpets inside. Just 25 more of these very special cars have been made and sold to a select band of owners in the biggest and most important markets for Rolls-Royce and Bentley cars. 12 of them were sold in the United States, another 5 in the Middle East and Europe, and the remaining 8 have been sold in Britain. All the Centenary cars were snapped up by eager buyers within days of the original announcement being made. But the original Centenary car, the 100,000th Rolls-Royce, is bound for a different destination. It will remain at Rolls-Royce. This was assured when the 2 longest-serving employees of the crew factory, 58-years-old Mrs. Margaret Green and 62-years-old Jack Goodwin, presented the keys to the chief executive, Richard Perry, for his safekeeping.
This is a great occasion in our history. The company is proud and delighted to receive the 100,000th motor car for safekeeping from Margaret Green and Jack Goodwin, who, through their long service, represent you all. Our 100,000th motor car is the finest tribute which could be made to the qualities of excellence and superb engineering on which the Rolls-Royce reputation was founded. Rolls-Royce and Bentley motor cars are still the pride of Britain, and the rest of the world has been unable to make anything like them for engineering refinement and undeniable hand-built quality. I'm certain that both founders, the Honourable Charles Rolls and Sir Henry Royce, would have been immensely proud of the way in which their standards and traditions have been continued over the years. When people speak of our company's name around the world, their words of praise have real meaning and are a valuable recognition of your skills and craftsmanship. 81 years is a long time to produce 100,000 cars, but that fact speaks volumes for itself. This is one of the great milestones in our fascinating history, and I want you all to take considerable satisfaction from this ceremony because we know together that we have continued and often enhanced those qualities and standards established so correctly generations ago. The company's reputation is in our hands, and our sincere hope must be for the future, and those who follow us must do everything they can to cherish what has been accomplished through the hard efforts of past years. It is our responsibility to preserve the best of what we have and to strive to set the new goals of tomorrow to ensure the most coveted title, makers of the best car in the world, remains well and truly where it belongs, among people who care about their skills, who cherish the fragile prize called reputation, and who continue to move the company forward to new heights and achievements. The 100,000th motor car, this splendid silver spur Centenary, is now a great ambassador to the huge motoring world in which we now compete. I'm delighted to receive these keys and registration documents into the company's custody and to thank everyone here and at our coach building company, Mulliner Park Ward in London, for their support and continuing cooperation in meeting our business plans. The company is only as good as its people, and Rolls-Royce people are amongst the finest.
The 100,000th car will join another special Rolls-Royce. This one dating from 1907 and currently valued at £500,000 in a special customer reception centre to be opened next year. This is the original Silver Ghost, which has already covered over 500,000 miles, showing would-be customers something of the Rolls-Royce virtues. It's a message which the buyers of the cars seem to have taken to their hearts over the years, as it's estimated that as many as 65,000 of that first 100,000 cars are still in existence. And there, in time, the Silver Ghost and the 100,000th car, the Silver Spur Centenary, may well be joined by another special Rolls-Royce. The company's 200,000th car and its successors?